So this political one here about environmental stuff. Patagonia. So basically, we're looking at a company that wants to churn out a big profit while minimizing their ecological impact. And in my impression was that they had to fail first because really they didn't have any type of guidance. They didn't have a mission statement. They didn't know where they wanted to go. And once they figured that out, their business really took off. Their mission statement, let me find that real quick, was, here it is, make the best product, cause no unnecessary harm, and use business to inspire and implement solutions to the environmental crisis. So that is the company we're talking about. And I didn't really think that the questions that we're supposed to ask were very relevant to what we were reading and what we're studying. It's mostly, I mean, like this first question, if you were charged with the responsibility to open one of Patagonia's new surf shops, what would you emphasize about the company to applicants to convince them that Patagonia is a satisfying place to work? What do you think?
So are we talking, am I opening a surf shop pre-pandemic or post-pandemic?
And also the question is, at what point are we doing this? Is it before they made all the changes? Or
I would think, I would assume I would go under the impression that it's today, like that it's like in the 2000s, you know, after they've established their brand and, you know, done all that kind of stuff.
Right. Okay. So really, they're asking about what the management style is. So the management style is your bosses are absent and you need to make sure that you are able to think independently and work independently and be in charge of yourself and follow through. So,
I mean, there is some, you know, when you think, you know, so there is some, so let's set aside their social justice, you know, their social responsibility for a second.
Yeah, let's just look at the business side of it.
Yeah, so to me, there is some, for me, I'll just speak for myself. There is some, something liberating about being in a work environment where you're treated like an adult and everyone there, like they said in the reading, you know, we know some people take advantage of the time off policy or the flex policy. They know that, but the reality is it's such a small amount that everyone doesn't suffer because of and in the end they may take advantage of it, but the work seems to still get done, you know.
Right.
And so I think for me, that is an environment I would thrive in, because I would, you know, because everyone would be passionate about what they're doing and they would just do, and you'd be independent. So I would really be that for me is an environment that when I manage people, I try to foster a sense of autonomy within loose boundaries. You know, here's the framework of what we need to do. We all know what our metrics are. However you get to those metrics, I'm going to leave that up to you, because you know in your area the best way to get there. You know with your clients and your accounts the best way to achieve the desired goals that we have as a team. So we would set the goals as a team, and then I would kind of just let them manage themselves so long as they were working towards that goal. And if they weren't, then we would course correct and get them back on track. So I kind of like that environment of autonomy, self-management. I don't see my bosses. They're not hovering over me and micromanaging me. I thrive in that kind of environment. So to me, that's how I would emphasize the surf shop, to be honest. Pre-pandemic, I won't talk about now because trying to hire people now is just, I mean, it doesn't matter what you give them. It's just, but pre-pandemic, it definitely would have been, I would have sold highly the work environment and the flexibility. You're treated like an adult. If you got to go do something, you go do it. Now, I will say on the flip side, that's at the corporate level. Retail's a little different. Because with retail,
talking about, is this a retail shop you think they're talking about?
Yeah, I think this is a retail shop, because a retail shop, you can't just say, hey, I'm not coming in today because,
Yeah.
So to me, this is where it's like you have that autonomy, but with boundaries. You still got to cover your shift, because, and so so to me, and if I've always seen, like, Patagonia to me is a brand, it's a niche brand.
Yeah.
If you're not a adventurer hippy dippy, you're not wearing Patagonia.
Yeah.
And you have to have a certain economic level to wear Patagonia. You're not, it's not an inexpensive brand.
That's true. That's true. Yeah. So there's for this business model, there's a lot of strengths and weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
And hit on one of the biggest weaknesses is it's a niche market. They're not going to get anyone else besides those people to buy their product.
Yeah.
At the same time, all of those people will, and there's
buy their product.
There's a lot out there.
Yeah.
That's
it's like a blessing and a curse, if you've created a name like them, like Patagonia has, them preaching what they preach with the 10% rule, that fits their brand. And that fits their clientele. So it, doesn't fit me, which is why I never buy their stuff, because first of all, I'll never have my size. And I don't espouse to climbing mountains and doing things that otherwise could kill me. It's not my it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah. I think I put together like a strengths and weaknesses of this kind of market. And for me, I have one of the strengths is because they're in such a niche, they can create the highest quality product for that. On the downside, they're going to have limited suppliers that will supply the type of product that they need to make at the level that they want it at. So
and they have to be constantly innovating.
Exactly.
Because they can't, and I think they talked about how they changed one of the fills to go like 100% recycled, out of the fabric. Yeah. And they have to continually do that, because if they don't, then they're hypocrites to their brand. I mean, their whole mission statement and brand would fall apart.
It would.
So they have to innovate. They have to continually do those things, which costs more money, which is why their product is at a certain, I would consider it a luxury item almost.
So I want to rewind just for a little bit and go back to that first question about, let me find it again, hang on. If you were trying to find somebody to work in that place, how would you present the company? But my question is there's a lot of autonomy there, and you need to be able to create your own schedule and to keep it and to be accountable for everything that you do without being overseen. How do you recognize that type of person? Because there's a lot of people who are not out like that and who cannot thrive in an environment like that. They need to be followers. So how would you spot those who wouldn't work out?
I think your interview questions have to. So when I used to when I was managing people, when they would get to me, they already gone through 2 levels of managers. And my interview was actually 2 questions. Define the word ownership and define the word accountability. And if they couldn't answer those two questions, and I would tell them, you need to answer them without using the word own, ownership, or accountability. You gotta give me a definition without re-saying the word. And if they could not define, and I found, you know, in the younger generation, it was very difficult for them unless they had a good work ethic, unless they came with a good work ethic, for them to define those words. And if an individual could not define those words, then I shook their hand and thanked them for their time. Because yeah. So to me, that I think, because we have to think about who are the people who are going to come, and let's say it's a retail shop, right? So who are the people going to come that are going to apply to work at Patagonia? You know, who are those? Yep. Well, it's going to be your affluent kids who are into adventure, because mom and dad can afford, you know, or it's going to either be how I envision it. You're going to be looking at affluent kids who come from a family with a higher than median net worth, who can afford to have their kids do these high-end sports, surfing, you know, things of that nature. Or it's going to be people who live a nomadic lifestyle, where they live in their Sprinter van and they're surfing half the year, and then they're going up to Vail the other. I mean, if you look at the owner's lifestyle, that's the person who, you know, because the other thing is, to work at Patagonia, you need to know the product.
Yeah.
You need to, when someone comes in asking for a certain thing, you need to be able to educate them on the best tool for whatever their activity is going to be, or the best clothing and this, that, and the other. So you have to be somewhat knowledgeable in the adventure sport, area.
Right.
So I think those interview questions are the key.
Yeah, I think you're right. I like that answer. Yeah. And as somebody going into human resources, I want to be able to know what are the good questions, and that's exactly.
Yeah. And I found people, I found over my lifetime that people are bad liars for the most part, unless they're psychopaths. But and so when you ask people a direct question where there's no wiggle room, they typically, their brains can't think fast enough to come up with a good lie. And I also find that when you say their name at the beginning of the question, so if I say, Lara, can you define the word? Right away, when I say their name, you pay attention.
Yeah.
And then you can't, and by doing that, it distracts them of thinking of an answer. Because
That's
I heard,
I like that trick. I may use that.
Use it on your kids.
I'm going to.
Like, I heard my name. Oh. Yeah. So and the other reality is, like, my daughter worked at a grocery store nearby in our hometown. And it's a local state grocery store. They're all throughout the state, but they had a policy when they hired high school kids, but they hired enough of them so that the kids could take all the time they needed for their fall, winter, and spring activities. So if you only wanted to work 1 day a week, they had the staffing for it. You then just worked 1 day a week. If you wanted to work 2, so I think that's the other key here, is it's that flexibility again, where you're honest with somebody up front and say, what's your extracurricular schedule? Do you surf in the morning? What is it? And then how much do you really want to work? Because if you only want to work 12 hours a week, okay, is that 4 3-hour shifts? Is that 3 4-hour shifts? Is that 2 6-hour shifts? And then you build a schedule. It's more work for the manager.
Yeah.
But you then have, instead of having a crew of 16 people to man a store, maybe you have a crew of 24.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no perfect way to do something, but there was a time in my life I managed a Kentucky Fried Chicken in my early management years, in a town that was a tourist town, and we went from 3,000 people to 30,000 people over the summer. And I literally would go from a crew of 6 people during the winter months to 35 to 40 for 5 months out of the year.
Wow, that's a big difference.
But you had to have that many because we lived in, middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, where the winter stunk. So you wanted to enjoy the summer, but still needed a job, so it's that balance.
So the rest of you, how would you enjoy working at a place like that with total control? Well, not total control, but as much control as a person could want over their own job.
It is my belief, and I still hold on to that belief. There is no hot ends on how to manage a business. It has been proven. There's none. Businesses have, I think there are thousands of styles of managing businesses. So it depends on who takes the initiative and create one. What Patagonia is doing is what the biggest businesses around now are trying to adapt to their system. That's what they're doing. I worked for a company about 20, 25 years ago, was a software development company where all the programmers and coders, 80% of them worked from home. Work from home was something I knew, decades ago. Yeah. They only came into the office twice every week to coordinate the codes they have written and then simulate them. And if it works, and then they make corrections and then they go back home. So I knew about working from home way, way far back. And that worked so much for that company in terms of achieving bottom lines. The guys were able to relax in the atmosphere, and do things they need to do. Your best work is done not when you are told to do something, but when you decide to do it. So you say the people that will work in Patagonia are people who can take initiatives. Those are not the people that can work there. But people like in the modern business environment, the traditional business environment, where you're always told what to do, this is your job description, and blah, 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 blah. So you come by every morning, you need to read this, you need to do that, you need to do that. And in the modern business, that really doesn't really work. We've gone all through the years to see that there are better ways of doing it. So Ben can come up today and have an idea of how he thinks administering his business will work well. And he'll be surprised if he puts them into place, it works. And people will start wanting to adopt that style because they want to achieve the same result he's achieving. Okay? The only issue with Patagonia was that initially he didn't know where he was going.
Yeah.
But he had a style, but he didn't know how to place it until the style started giving him problems, so he needed help. And then he had to go out to seek for help, and they gave him some ideas, and he came back and thought about it. Then he started putting things into place, and things started working the way he wants to work. You don't need to put on a tie to come to work. I don't need to, I don't need to put on a fancy high heel shoe, come. Because I do not see in anywhere that contributes to my inefficiency or effectiveness. So it's what is in here. So I believe the best work is done when you are comfortable where you are sitting. You're happy coming into it. For example, I will say in my own company, okay, come to work between, if you need to come to work between 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock. I won't say work time is 8 o'clock. Now, between this time, you can come to work, to start your work day, and then you can continue to do the things you're expected to do. The important thing is, this thing God gave to us between our ears, being able to use it is something that is very difficult for many people to do. Very, very difficult. So Patagonia's company gives you the opportunity to do that. And that is a very difficult thing to do. It's a very difficult thing to do. It's not easy at all. So some people will definitely run away from that company. They don't want to go work there because they can't. Thinking is the most difficult thing to do. Thinking.
It's kind of less like, To this day, I'm astonished at the number of people who struggle with ministry because it's not home teaching or visiting teaching.
Yeah.
It's the same concept. They like that
Mhm.
structure. It was, we get our lesson every month. I set my appointment on the last day of the month at church. I come over, I read the lesson, I ask my 5 questions, check, check, check. See you next month. Where now you actually have to open your heart. You actually have to, like Nduka said, you have to use your brain. You have to care what's the best way to, maybe this person, maybe the best thing isn't a visit. It's just texting. You have to really find the best thing. And I was always more impressed when the change happened, and it just blew my faithful members who never missed a month of home teaching in 50 years.